Dear Mr. Chairman, dear members of the Board of Governors, my esteemed colleagues, it's a great pleasure to talk with you, and I would like to start by offering a very general distinction about the difference between the first session and the second session. As you know, the Hebrew University, as any other university, is divided basically between the Faculty of the Sciences and the Faculty of the Humanities. What's the nature of this distinction? In the Faculty of the Sciences, we are researching everything that we have not made. We may call it nature or we ascribe it to God. However, we certainly admit that we are not responsible on the sea and the suns, on the stars and the planet, on the process of creation. This is well known. So humbly, we are studying to the best of our capacity the mysteries of creation. That's what they're doing in the sciences, and we just had the opportunity to hear how much there is to know. How did you sum it? 90% of the matter we don't know, 10% we hope to know. However, we know very well that we are studying what we, human beings, have not done. In the Faculty of the Humanities, we do exactly the other way around. We are studying everything to the best of our capacity that humans had done. We are very curious about the particular, not about the universal. Our colleagues in the sciences are interested in the universal, in the simple, in the precise. We are interested exactly in the other way. We are interested in the intricate, in the unique, in the non-universal, in the very many differences between cultures and languages, humans and literatures, because this is the most fascinating thing. Because the humanities are about all what humans had done, with no distinctions. Humans of all cultures, humans of all religions, humans of past, humans of the present, hopefully humans of the future. We are very much interested about the gap between the way things are and the way things ought to be. Great literature was talking about this gap, how things are as we observe them and how things ought to be as we believe they should be. The Bible is telling us that we should pursue justice, that we should avoid war, that we should pursue study and rest. All those are well-known things. However, it wasn't all that well-known in a period when most people in the world were slaves, where there was no day of rest, where there was no literacy for all. We need to remember that great literature is about the gap between the way things are and the way they ought to be. That's what the humanities are interested to learn. Now, I would like to talk about the issue of creation in mystical literature. In one word, what is mysticism? This is the history of the freedom of human imagination, defying the constraints of human history. It is all imagination. It's creative imagination. It is defiance against the constraints of human experience, which in the Jewish case was more often than not an experience of persecution and destruction, wars and blood libels, false charges and injustice. We had defied it in the only field where we were completely free people, in the field of human imagination. Luckily, we never had a church. Nobody ever told us what is that we should think. We were very well told how we should behave in the Jewish law and in the external non-Jewish society. External behavior was closely monitored until the modern era. However, only in the Jewish nation there was a complete freedom of thought. We were told that there are holy scriptures and there is freedom of interpretation. There is the book of God and there is the human free spirit that offers new ideas. As soon as we understood that, the first conclusion was, let us improve the holy scriptures. Let us add to them new interpretations. Let's offer an alternative way of thinking. And since, as I said, we always had enjoyed the unrestricted power of creativity, and that is a unique thing about Jewish intellectual history, since we enjoyed the power of creativity, we had used it to its excess. Now, the first story of creation after the biblical well-known story is the story of the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees was written in the 2nd century before the Common Era, when the Jews were mastered by the Seleucians. Seleucians are Greek-Syrian kings, the heir of Alexander the Great, who took over the land of Israel in the year 175 and imposed a new lunar calendar on the Jews who had a different calendar, and the Jews felt that their culture is in danger. They decided to start a new kind of story, because whenever you tell a new story of creation, in fact, you tell your new perspectives on history, on culture, and on the gap between things are and as they ought to be. I would like to read to you a very challenging sentence. It's one sentence, 8 lines in its length. So I'm not sure if I can make it without stop to breathing, and don't worry if you don't follow every word. I just want you to note how the story of creation in the book of Jubilee starts, and I would say in advance, they add Jerusalem, because you see in Genesis, Jerusalem is not mentioned directly. In our Bible, Jerusalem is first mentioned in the book of Joshua. But when Jerusalem was endangered by Seleucian conquest, the writers of Jubilee's story of creation are not postponing Jerusalem to Joshua, they are bringing it to the force in the very beginning story of creation. And they are doing it in a very wise way. The second deficiency they found about Genesis, which they admired, adored, and sanctified, but there was only one thing missing there. Nobody identified the identify of the storyteller. It starts wonderfully when God had created heaven and earth, and you know Genesis 1:1. However, nobody is telling you who is telling the story. Jubilees rectify the situation and says, it is the angel of the presence who is relating the story of creation to Moses. Because poor Moses, how would he have known what had happened 2,500 years before he was born? There was no Bible there was no book before he was born. So who would tell the story? So the angel of the presence is the one who relates on Mount Sinai the story of creation, from creation to the Exodus, in a very concise way, in 50 chapters, which corresponds to Genesis and the 21st chapters of Exodus, and it starts like that. And the angel of the presence, who went before the camp of Israel, took the tablets of the division of years from the time of the creation of the law and testimony according to their weeks of years, according to the Jubilees, year by year throughout the full number of Jubilees, from the day of creation until the day of the new creation, when the heaven and earth and all their creatures shall be renewed according to the powers of heaven and according to the whole nature of earth, until the sanctuary of the Lord is created in Jerusalem upon Mount Zion. And all the lights will be renewed for healing and peace and blessings for all of the elect of Israel, and in order that it might be thus from that day and unto all the days of the earth. This is all one sentence. That's the way the Jubilees start the story of creation. On a literary scale, we can certainly prefer Genesis, but Genesis does not include Jerusalem and Mount Zion. Jubilees puts Mount Zion, which was defiled by the Seleucian kings when they instituted there a golden sculpture, and puts Jerusalem, that was defiled by the Seleucian kings when they demanded Antiochia to be the great place of the Seleucian rule. They said from the very beginning, Jerusalem and Mount Zion were the center of these things. Now they realize that something else is missing. The topic of the day was a new questionable calendar that was imposed on the Jews against their will by King Antiochus. The Jews said, oh no, we don't want, that's 2nd century before the Common Era, we don't want a wrong calendar. We don't want a foreign calendar. We want our calendar of freedom, because the Jewish great perception from the very first page of Genesis is that while the world had been created by God forever and ever by eternal cycles, it's only human beings who can stop every 7 days according to the divine pattern and count and recount and account. What does it mean? It means that we are told that every 7 days we have to stop everything that we are doing, urgent as it might be, and convene together to read again, to read aloud the story of the creation of God, the story of the history of Israel, to consolidate a community of memory, a community of identity. Now, Jubilees knew all that very well. As I said, Genesis was sanctified. It only added a few more notions about the number 7. The first sentence that I read included the division of time to weeks of years, which means Shnat Shemitah, every 7 years, and Jubilees, which means every 7 of years. In the following sentence, Jubilee says the following. And the angel of the presence spoke to Moses by the word of the Lord, saying, write the whole account of creation, that in 6 days the Lord God completed all his work and all that he created. And he observed the Sabbath, the 7th day, and he sanctified it for all ages. And he set it as a sign for all his works. Please note, whether you are observant or secular, from the very story of creation, the idea of the Sabbath is a bequest to all the human race. It's not only for a particular nation, it's the idea of freedom. Every 7th day, decreed by God. You don't have to negotiate about it, you don't need it as a favor. It's a gift of freedom for all humanities. Now, for on the first day, he created the heat, that's God. For on the first day he created the heavens, which are above, and the earth and the waters and all the spirits of which minister before him. This is new, because Genesis doesn't tell us that there are spirits which are ministering before the Lord. Jubilees continue to detail the nature of those spirits. Please note the beautiful connection between angels and nature. So it says, for on the first day he created the heavens which are above, and the earth and the waters and all the spirits which minister before him, the angels of the presence, and the angels of the sanctification, and the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirit of the winds, and the angels of the spirits of the clouds, and darkness, and snow, and hail, and frost, and the angels of resoundings, and thunder, and lightning, and the angels of the spirits of cold, and heat, and winter, and springtime, and harvest, and summer, and all of the spirits of his creatures which are in heaven and on earth. Now, this is very beautiful, because it means that one may never disregard nature. Nature is being sanctified by the very presence of the angels in every aspect of the eternal natural cycles. Nature is sanctified, and in the very first covenant with Noah, we are told that eternal time cycles are to be observed, that nature should be sanctified. Very modern ecological ideas have their precedents 2,200 years ago, when we are told that every aspect of nature is divinely gifted and is angelic guarded, and we should be observant of it. Now, as I said, number one thing that we were told is that we have to count every 7 days, and every 7 years, and every 7 appointed holiday of the Lord, and every 7 of years, and those eternal cycles of freedom and eternal cycles of scholarly convening together are what assure us that humanity and culture and memory would proceed forever and ever. Not only the natural cycles, because nature would work very well without us. The sun will rise without us, but Sabbath will never be without us. Those cycles of resigning of human sovereignty, cycles of freedom and literacy, will never take care if we will not do that, if we will not stop, if we will not sanctify, if we will not convene those communities of memory, identity, scholarship, and all that, that will not occur. The reason that the Jewish people are around, while many of our contemporaries from antiquities, Babylonians and Hittites, Jebusites and Perizzites, Sumerian, Akkadians, and all those mighty nations, much greater than we were, all of them are not around anymore because they didn't have cycles of stopping from work, stopping from slavery, convening together, teaching the children, learning and appreciating these cycles of resigning human sovereignty in order to remember the greatness of creation and the greatness of divine grace. Now, in this third day, there is a very interesting addition to what we know from the Bible. The Bible tells us about the creation of the third day, and Jubilee expands, and it says, "On the third day he did as he said to the waters, let them pass from the surface of the whole earth into one place, and let the dry land appear. And the water did as he said, and they turned aside from upon the surface of the earth into one place outside of this firmament, and dry land appeared. And on that day he created for it all the seas in each of their gathering places, and all of the rivers, and the gathering places of the waters on the mountains and in the earth, and all of the ponds, and all of the dew of the earth, and the seed which is sown, and everything which is eaten, and trees which bear fruits, and other trees. And here is the interesting addition, and the Garden of Eden, in the place of luxury, outside the circuits of the moon and the circuits of the sun, in the luxuriant earth. And everything, these four species, the Lord made on the third day." Why do I point out this paradise or Garden of Eden beyond the circles of sun and moon? Because sun and moon, as you know, and as was mentioned by my colleague, were created only on Wednesday, while paradise was created on Tuesday. It means that Garden of Eden is beyond time and space. Time and space are not affecting the eternity of paradise. This very idea that there is time before time and space before space is very, very fantastic, because it makes us to wonder, what does it mean, time before time? What does it mean, creation before time? Because please note that human time can start only on Wednesday, when there is sun and moon. Thus, the Jewish calendar of old in antiquity would always start on the first of the first on Wednesday, on the day of the vernal equinox. That is the months of freedom. That's the months of Exodus of Egypt. That's the months when humans were granted freedom and time could be counted. No day could be counted before Wednesday, because Wednesday is the days of the luminaries. For us humans, time is accountable only where we observe sun and moon, day and night. That's for us signification of time. But for God, paradise was created before the sun and the moon. Thus, there is a way of thinking about time which is not connected with day and night, time spans of human calculation. There is eternal sphere that might be used for all kinds of important things. Now you may ask, what was the most important thing that this paradise was used for? You'll be amazed to know that that was the place where the seventh of the human generation was taken up to in order to learn to read, write, and calculate. The name of this very important person was Enoch, son of Jared. In Hebrew, Hanoch. All of you who knows Hebrew, you know that chinuch means education. Hanoch was the first educated man who was taken to paradise to learn from the angels. The angels are those who live in paradise and those who bequest knowledge of letters, numbers, reading and counting and accounting for the first human being who was the first teacher, the first high priest, according to the legendary mystical tradition. But the question that this legendary tradition offers is, how did humans start to read and write? The mystical answer is a very interesting one. They learn it from angels in paradise. That's as good an answer as any other, because we have no idea how somebody had written such a wonderful sentence as Yair Zakovich was reading, referring in the beginning of Genesis. How does this very excellent sentence, in the beginning God had created heaven and earth, and the wind was, you remember the beautiful beginning of Genesis, when the Spirit of God was hovering above the water and the abyss and all that. How did that happen? You can't start by writing such a sentence. Somebody must have taught someone to write it. We don't know exactly the history of tuition and the history of literacy, but the mystical idea is that the first human who was taken to paradise, where eternal wisdom was kept, was taught to read and write by the angel. I would stop here about the the creation story of Jubilees. And I would just say that Jubilees was very much interested in the idea of creating time before time and on expanding human knowledge and human spirit in connection with the angels. I would like to tell you about the second creation story, which is utterly different, entirely unknown. It is called the Book of Creation, Sefer Yetzirah. It's an unicum. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know where it was written. We don't know exactly on what circumstances. We know only one thing. It was written in Hebrew, in unique Hebrew. Scholars are conflicting about the question whether it was in the 1st century or the 6th century. It doesn't really matter. We know it was written in the 1st millennium. And we know that they start to tell again, anew, a story of creation, which brought something entirely new to the consideration. The story of creation, of the Book of Creation, anonymously written, tells us that creation, in fact, started in an entirely different way. I'll read this very beautiful long sentence of creation, and I'll explain it a little later. In 32 wondrous passages of wisdom, engraved Yah, the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, the living God, El Shaddai, high and exalted, dwelling all the way to the heights, whose name is holy, and he created his worlds through 3 books, through Sefer, book, and Sfar, number, and Sipur, story. 10 Sfirot, or 10 digits, or 10 spheres, 10 Sfirot of infinite nothingness, and 22 principal letters. 10 Sfirot of infinite nothingness, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Understand in wisdom and search with understanding. Analyze with them and search with them. Know and contemplate and create and establish things on its entirety, truth and restore the Creator to his place. Because he creates and crafts by himself, and there is no one else. And in its measures are 10, and they have no end. 10 spheres of nothingness. Stop your heart from contemplating, and stop your mouth from talking. And if your heart runs, return to the place about which it was said, and the living creatures run back and forth. And because of this, the covenant was enacted. 10 spheres of infinite nothingness. Its end is connected to its beginning, and its beginning to its end, as the fire is connected to the burning coal. Know and think and create. The Master is one, and the Creator is one, and no one else is comparable with him. And in front of the one, what are you counting? 10 spheres of infinite nothingness. Their measure is 10, and they have no end. Depths of beginning and depths of an end. Depths of good and depths of evil. Depths of the top and depths of the bottom. The depths of east and the depths of west. The depths of north and the depths of south. And only one Master, Lord, faithful King, ruling over all, from his sacred dwelling place for all eternity. This is the beginning of the Book of Creation. Even if we can't follow every sentence, only the first one I would like you to note. In 32 wondrous passages of wisdom, engraved Yah, the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, and so on, and he created his world through 3 books, through Sefer, book, and Sfar, or Sifra, number, and Sipur, story. There is an entirely new perception of creation. What are 32 passages of wisdom? It's the accumulation of 10 numbers and 22 letters, the very first 10 digits which are known to us, and the 22 Hebrew letters. Now, what is it noticeable about that? Because in the Genesis story of creation, we are at the most obedient listeners, curious listeners. We may appreciate the beauty, the marvel, the genius of the creation, but we know only too well that we are not participating in the very process because we cannot form suns, moons, and planets. However, in the Book of Creation, story of creation, when the world was created by its very beginning definition, by 32 passages of wisdom, which are explained as 22 infinite letters and 10 endless digits. There we are also a part. We also understand letters. We also understand numbers. Now, there might be an inherent difference between the letters of the divine creation, which unite speech and action, thought, speech, and action. We don't. We have to think separately, talk separately, and do differently. However, while for the divine unity, speech, thought, and action are one, for the human thought, speech is available, thought is available, and action is available, and all of them are result of letters and numbers. The very idea that letters and numbers are the factors of creation make us participants in the divine, glorious story of creation in an unprecedented way. Now, what does it mean? Just exactly as creation is infinite, just exactly as creation is marvelous, we may participate in the marvelous story of creation because we may add to it. As soon as we search, as soon as we study, as soon as we impart knowledge, as soon as we create knowledge, as soon as we contemplate of those marvels that we did not create, as soon as we give them words, as soon as we realize that there are planets which are not there yet, and as soon as we understand that there are powers which we don't name yet, but we will name, as soon as we understand that the transcendent is the horizon and not only the tangible, as soon as we understand that there is no end to human freedom and to human creativity, exactly as there is no end to the powers of nature, then we are part of the story of creation. The book of creation is a book which has only 3 folios, no more. It's not really a book, it's rather a booklet. 1,000 pages, the whole entire mystical library is footnote to the book of creation. The idea that letters and numbers are divine and are shared by humans are the very foundation of Kabbalah, the very foundation of this huge defiance of the human spirit against the constraint of history and evil and cruelty. The idea that wisdom is unlimited, that the transcendence is perceived by human imagination, that creativity is divine and human alike, was espoused by the human race from antiquity and by the Jewish people from the second millennium before the Common Era. When we were told that the words of God are written on the tablets, immediately we started to add to them, to interpret them, to refashion them, to retell them. When did we do it? Especially in times of strife and time of words. In the 13th century, when the Jewish people were nearly devastated in the end of 2nd century of the Crusades between 1096 to 1296, people in Spain, the Jewish community of Spain that was less harmed relatively by the Crusaders, had forged together a new perception of creation, entirely different. Then they said, it is not the old creation story that we know it, which is suffice. We need to create an entirely new story of creation when we would realize that there is a purpose to all what we suffer. There is a God of history, although he seems so far and transcendent, much more than the God of nature. Because in the beauty of nature, we share thank God every day. But in the harshness of history, we seems, at least as the Jews of 2,000 years of exile, about the harshness of history, we can do very, very little, other than educate our children, convene a community, teach that there would be a day when there would be no more war and one nation will not lift a sword onto another nation. In our divine imagination, there are no swords and there is no rifle. There are no theomachia and there are no wars between gods. In our perception, there were spirits of ruchot emet, ruchot da'at emet v'tzedek bekodesh kodashim, spirits of knowledge, truth, and justice in the Holy of Holies, as we are told in the songs of the Sabbath liturgy, found in Qumran 60 years ago. But when Albert Einstein, not knowing, of course, about the Qumran finding, which did not occur at this time, when Albert Einstein was asked, what is that that makes you proud to be a Jew? He said, because I'm a member of a nation that always pursued knowledge, truth, and justice. Those are exact words of the songs of the Sabbath liturgy that said, the poet said to the angels, they are spirits of knowledge, truth, and justice in the Holy of Holies. There where the Jews had left them forever in order to pursue them time and again. In the days of the Crusades, after the Crusades, when most of the Jews of Germany and France were exterminated, when the only tiny Jewish community of Spain was left, the people in Gerona, in Segovia, in Barcelona were writing the following stories, which starts with a new story of creation. Their story of creation is very strange and very complicated. That's what starts what we call Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the defiance of human spirits against human atrocity. So they start. At the head of potency of the king, he engraved engravings in luster on high. A spark of impenetrable darkness flashed within the concealed of the concealed, from the head of infinity. A cluster of vapor forming in formlessness, thrust in a ring, not white, not black, not red, not green, no color at all. Remember the beautiful slides that we were shown before? It sounds like this description. A cluster of vapor forming in formlessness, thrust in a ring, not white, not black, not red, not green, no color at all. As a cord surveyed, it yielded radiant colors. Deep within the spark gushed a flow, splaying colors below, concealed within the concealed of the mystery of the infinite. It split and did not split its aura, was not known at all until under the impact of splitting a single concealed supernal point shone. Beyond that point, nothing is known, so it is called beginning, first command of all. Now it goes on and on, I can read the whole book, but it wants to impart the sense of the infinite, of the endlessness, of the divine structure of history, which seems to have utterly unstructured and chaotic. There is a reason, there is a rhythm, there is a number, because the whole mystical tradition is about structures and numbers as against chaotic historical experience. The beauty of wisdom, imagination, and freedom is the summing up of the idea that there are no constraints to the human spirit and there is no end to the desired freedom to learn, to ponder, to study, to search, to create, to name, to count, account, and recount. Please remember that when you study, every nation has its own heritage. Every nation has its own stories, mythologies, memories, and communal values. In the case of the Jewish people, the idea that every 7 days we have to stop from everything we're doing in order to read aloud for the benefit of all the community, to educate our children 6 days of the week, much before they grow up, in order to go to work. We believed in literacy, freedom, imaginary perception, and pursuing truth, knowledge, and justice. Thank you very much.
Well, we have time for a couple of questions. Everyone to raise any. We have a mic.
Thank you very much for two very exciting lectures. I have a question which is addressed mainly to the first speaker, but also to the second one. And it has to do with the themes which repeat themselves in the myths of creation. One theme is the number 7, The number 7, which repeats itself again and again, is a kind of a holy number, kind of a very special number. The number of the days of creation and the number of the days they took to encircle Jericho, and it repeats itself again and again. In fact, in the Bible, number 7 has become synonymous with also the word for oath, for taking the oath. And of course, there are theories about why it is the number 7, not the number 8 or 6 or some other number. And some theories say it is because of the 7 orifices of the human face. Other theories talk about the 7 planets which were known in antiquity. And my question is whether this number 7, in your opinion, and I'm addressing this to both speakers, whether this number 7, in fact, had to do psychologically with this kind of relationship of ancient people who composed these texts, either to their own body or to the universe in which they lived. The second question, if I may, has to do with the parting of the waters, which is another theme. As you can tell in, for example, the story of Marduk and Tiamat, there's not only water, there's also blood. And according to some theories, again, this has to do with the fact of the human birth, because in the human birth, you have water and blood, both. So the question is whether the attitude to the human birth has to do with those myths of creation. And just one very brief last question has to do with the number 10. Why is it that the number 10 was so special to the people who composed the Book of Jubilees and to people who composed other texts of Jewish mysticism? Thank you very much.
Wow, what a question. Well, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. I cannot really answer your questions, but as far as the numbers are concerned, as I said, the number 7 was already a very important number in the ancient Near East, not just in our culture, Babylonian literature, Canaanite literature. But it's not only number 7, it's also number 10, also number 3. I could have given lectures about the importance of number 3 in the Bible, about the importance of number 10 in the Bible, and I have no idea. Perhaps it's really a question for psychologists to deal with the importance of these specific numbers. I don't know.
Okay. I will try to answer from the mystical tradition. Only in Hebrew, the word 7 has the meaning of oath, shvu'ah, and covenant. The very first page of the Bible tells us that time should be counted in units of 7. This is the particular unit of Jewish time. That being said in the very beginning of the Bible, but it's not only counting, it is the idea that it's counting of cycles of freedom which could be observed only by human beings, because nature doesn't have any closing stops. Nature is permanent and perpetual. It is changing on cyclical order on various ways, but it never stops. The right of stopping, the right of counting in order to stop is only a human right according to a divine decree. This is the very foundation of freedom, and we need to remember that. So the word oath, shvu'ah, and the word 7, sheva, is the very foundation of perpetual cycles of freedom. And even people who know one word of the Bible benefit for the last 3 millennia and more from the idea that 7 is the guarantee of free time for freedom, rest, scholarship, communal convening, and the other things that we discussed before. About the number 10. 10 is the important number from the 10 commandments, of course. And since God chose to decree 10 commandments, 10 is a classical number for the Jewish tradition. But in the history of mysticism, they are talking on 10 infinite spheres, pointing out that every number at the very same time has the dialectics of being finite and infinite. They say 10 numbers of 10 sfirot blima, 10 numbers or 10 digits or 10 grades of infinite nature. Those very 10 numbers that each child of us knows to count as soon as one counts his own fingers. We can make various connections on the different parts of the bodies and the different ideas of numbers, but the one thing that matters is that among all species on Earth, only humans were blessed with the capacity to count, account, and recount. And numbers are always those which point to us the connection between the finite and the infinite, the dialectic of creation and annihilation. We know the infinity of numbers from quite a long time ago. The more we learn, the more we ponder into that, the more we are getting closer to understanding the infinite secrets and cycles of creation.
Another question? Yeah, for a minute. The question comes from the opposite of the mic. Yeah, it's coming. Coming.
With one book of creation,
Louder, please.
with one book of creation, the Torah, we are advised to study, dig, and delve into it. How come that the mysticals advise us that for the Zohar, if you cannot study it, just hold it in your hand, even without opening. Just hold it and stay with it for a little while, every day.
Rachel, you get it? Oh, do me a favor, please. Can you repeat louder? Because here we cannot hear. Sorry.
What about now?
Just slowly and louder, please.
And now?
Now is better.
Okay, my question is, why with the Torah we are advised to dig and delve into it, to study it with all our hearts? How come that the Zohar, we are advised by Hasidim, mystics, to hold it in among our hands, just once a day, every single day, and that would be enough to absorb its meaning?
I'm not sure where from you take the definition of holding it in one's heart, but the idea is, it is like a saying in the book of creation that one should think and ponder and contemplate before one puts it into words. They're talking on the dialectic of thinking, of contemplating, thinking, imploring, exploring, creating, interpreting, saying, don't think that word is only what is written on the page. Every word is like an iceberg. It has a long, long tail of meanings, of possibilities, of opposites. It's the very work with words which the mystical tradition is offering its readers. And it says the very beginning of that work is not reading it fast, not in a running car, but reading it very slowly, thinking on every word, distract it into letters, unite it into its opposite, read it from left to right, from right to left, from above to beyond, play with letters. What Austin Reed called it, how to do things with words. That's exactly what the mystical tradition is offering. It does not preach secrecy, it preached thinking and contemplation. It had become a secret tradition only after the messianic rapture of the 17th century, when the Jews were after Sabbatianism and the rabbis advised to restrain the mystical tradition for the illuminated circles, which of course immediately had made it bestsellers, because before some people were interested and others were not. As soon as it was prohibited, it had become the interest of every Jew, illiterate or not. Thank you.
Last question. Come. Yep.
I'm not going to make a profound question. It's only that I'm Ashkenaz and married to a Sephardic. I've always heard, and everybody says, you can never mention the number 5. 5 is like something bad, something that you you wish someone something bad or never say 5. Well, what does that mean?
Not in our community. You know that we have 5 books of the Torah, and the rabbis make it very clear that even the book of Psalms is divided into 5 books. The same way Moses gave us the 5 books of the Torah, David gave us the 5 books of Psalms. So for us, the number 5 is a perfect number.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would add to that only one sentence. Every number has the infinite capacity to be interpreted and to be associated. In Hebrew and in Judaism, we don't have any evil numbers. The 13 is the Christianity contribution, or 66 as a bad number is Christianity. In Judaism, all numbers are considered to be divine. All counting is considered to be divine and human intellect concern. And combining numbers, analyzing numbers, and relating to them in an abstract way and concrete way is certainly one of the best heritage of the Jewish tradition. All numbers are welcome, all letters are welcome. Freedom of creating and recreating them is our heritage. Thank you.
I want to thank every one of you because you came very early after a night that we have a nice meeting yesterday. I want to thank again Professor Elior, Professor Sakovic, Professor Sari, and Professor Deckel. And as I started this meeting, we enjoy breadth and depth in science. We enjoy breadth and depth in the traditional Bible and literature and knowledge. And I think we enjoy breadth and depth in the connection of those two worlds. Thank you very much.